welcome you to tonight's webinar from Ask the ARC on preparing for life after high school. As I said, my name is Carly Shortino-Poulter, and I'm the director of the ARC Advocacy Network. But more importantly, I'm a fellow mom. I have a 22-year-old son with autism, and it hasn't been that long ago that I was going through these exact same things. And the irony in all of this is, we know at some point high school is going to end, and generally we have a good idea of when that's going to end. But at the same time, it seems like it is so far away. And sometimes we are so focused on just getting through school and just making it through classes and dealing with the IEP and everything else that thinking about life after high school just seems like it's so far away. And it can feel so overwhelming. And oftentimes we feel like we're having to figure this all out on our own, that we don't know where to start. And we don't know what to think about. And we don't know how to find the resources that are out there. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to try to make this a little more attainable. We're going to talk about, what we're looking for when high school ends, to try to make sure that our loved ones are able to have a good life. And so whether you have a young child and you're thinking ahead, and if you are, wow, you're much better than me. If you have a child in high school right now, and you're trying to start making those plans, or maybe your loved one exited high school a long time ago, and you're trying to figure out some new resources and some new things to do. We're going to talk about all of that. We are recording tonight's session, and we will be posting it online. So I do want to say, if you'd like to ask your questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A. We'd love to have your questions. I want you to be able to ask your questions. That's why it's called Ask the ARC. But just as importantly, I want to hear from you guys, because the reality is I think we learn a lot from each other. So what are the things you've tried? What are the things that have been successful? What are the things that haven't been successful? Because I think that, when we as families are able to talk to each other, as we are able to share with one another, it helps improve the lives for all of us. So I want to go ahead and get started. I do see, I did see somebody saying hi in the Q&A, but let's go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen here. And so let's get started. So as we talk about preparing for life after high school, I think it kind of boils down to two different paths. And the first path is that administrative or programmatic path, where we have to think about things like waivers, and we have to think about Social Security benefits. We have to think about support options, more of that administrative or legal type arena. But then we also have those life skill arena, where we're talking about experiences. We're talking about independence. We're talking about choice and decision-making, and we're talking about trying and trying again and trying again and trying again. And it's those life skill type things that I want to talk about today. That's the path that I want to go down. And so when we're talking about that, I think one of the universal truths is that we want our loved ones to have a meaningful day, whatever that means for them. For some people, that can very well mean a job. For some, that means continuing their education. Others may be interested in volunteering. It's also about having a social life and having self-determination. So when we're starting that transition process, first of all, it is never too early to start. There are certain formal processes that begin around age 14. And so, for example, that transition case conference is actually going to be held for the school year in which a student turns 14. I know that's kind of an awkward way to say that, but one of the reasons I say it that way is because I will be perfectly honest. I knew that the transition case conference was when a student turned 14. Well, we had our transition case conference when my son was still 13 because he was going to turn 14 the next year. And I will be perfectly honest, I had a full-blown meltdown. I did not react well to that. I was not prepared for that because I was thinking that was still another year away. And my son's teachers, bless their hearts, they totally just kind of walked me through it. I kid you not, I was really struggling through it, but I knew it was still coming. And that's the reality of this is if you're feeling like that, if you're feeling overwhelmed like that, you're not alone. I think that's a really common thing. And so while certain formal processes like the transition case conference, like the pre-employment transition services program, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, while some of those things start around 14, we really want to start the process earlier if we can. And I genuinely mean, let's start preparing for adulthood when our kids are 4, if we've got that option. But if you're past that point in life, that's okay too, because we just start it as soon as we can. And we should never beat ourselves up for all of those things. We just start where we're at and move forward. And often when we're doing all of that, we start by looking at the services and the supports that are available. We look at and we base our options and our decisions on the resources that are available to us. We adjust our thoughts, we adjust our investigations, we adjust our dreams and our plans to fit what already exists, what we've heard about. But in reality, we should actually do the opposite. We should start with our loved ones' dreams. We should start with whatever their vision of a good life is, and then figure out how to achieve that. And one of the ways to do that is through something called the Life Course Framework. Hopefully you have heard about the Life Course Framework before. This is something that the Bureau of Developmental Disabilities is using with all of their clients. But this is also something that Vocational Rehabilitation Services is also starting to use with the individuals they work with. It was developed by the University of Missouri Kansas City's Institute for Human Development. And the whole idea behind Life Course is that all people have the right to live, love, work, learn, play, and pursue their life's aspirations in their community. But the Life Course Framework, it's not a program, it's a philosophy. It's a set of guiding principles that assist individuals to define what they want, and just as importantly, what they don't want in life, to help determine an individual's strengths, to identify current and potential resources that can serve as integrated supports, especially when it comes to things like technology and relationships and community supports and those eligibility specific options. It helps to identify an individual's vision of a good life and then to determine the skills and resources needed to achieve that good life. And the best part is they've got all sorts of tools to walk you through all of this because it can be overwhelming and there are so many different parts to our lives. The nice thing is Life Course has really kind of helped break that down for us and make it a little more attainable. All of their tools are available at lifecoursetools.com. And the best part is they're all free. And let's be honest, free is good. But this is one of their tools. And it's one that I like, especially as we're talking about, what our options are, because this is all about exploring life possibilities. And so down at the bottom, you have what our society has traditionally done when it comes to people with disabilities in different life areas. So, for example, traditionally, when we're talking about people with disabilities and we're talking about daily life and employment, we're talking about sheltered workshops, we're talking about day programs, we're talking about work crews or work enclaves. But now we have more opportunities available than there ever have been before. So now our discussions are expanding because our options are expanding. So now we're not just talking about jobs, we're talking about careers. We're talking about different educational options. So we're talking about online classes and trainings. We're talking about inclusive college programs. We're talking about college, and tech schools. We're also talking about things like micro enterprises. We're talking not just about jobs, but we're also talking about the possibility of people with disabilities owning their own businesses and tailoring their employment to make sure that it fits individuals and their own needs and their own desires. So we've got a lot of different possibilities. And that's why I like this tool is it helps bring up some of those possibilities in all of the different categories of life. Life Course calls those life domains. So daily life and employment, community living, healthy living, safety and security, social and spirituality, advocacy and engagement. But then they've also got supports for the families, as well as integrated supports. This is another tool that I like, especially as we are trying to figure out what is life going to be like after high school. Well, part of it is trying to figure out what is that vision of a good life. And what I like about this particular tool is there are two versions of it. There's one for the individual to fill out, but then there's one for the family to fill out. And I do recommend that you fill these out, but you fill them out separately, and then come back together to compare them. And they ask, questions to kind of prompt you to think about, what it is that you want, either for yourself or for your loved one. But I recommend each of you doing that and coming back and comparing them, because you would be amazed at how often your vision of a good life for your loved one and your loved one's vision of a good life for themselves may not always match. And so it's a great way to start some of those conversations. This is another tool that I particularly like, and it's a 2-page tool because one of the things that Life Course also helps you do is identify what types of resources are available to you. And so they're looking at personal strengths and assets. They're looking at what relationships you have in your life that may be able to help you in different areas. What type of technology is available? What types of community-based supports are available? And then also what types of eligibility-based supports may be available to you. And again, they break that down into each one of those different life domains to make it a little bit more attainable. But I have to admit, this is actually my favorite of all of the tools. This is called a life trajectory. And what I like about it is here in this purple box on the upper right-hand corner, it's what is your vision of a good life? And then down at the bottom, and sometimes this is the easier question is, what do you not want in life? I like this one. This is a split trajectory. I like it because it's also talking about what past experiences do you have that are getting you to your good life? What experiences do you still need going forward to achieve your good life? And then just as importantly, what experiences do you have that are taking you away from that? And what are the things you need to be careful of? This is a second part of that of that life portfolio. And I like this because this is what I call a cheat sheet to the individual. Because here in the top box, it's what do people like and admire about me? And it's one of those things where I want the individual to answer that because I want to know what they think of, what they believe people like and admire about them. But then I also want other people to answer that too in front of the individual, because we don't very often ask or tell people in general what we like and admire about them. And I think that can be really affirming and can be really encouraging when somebody says, I really love that you do X. I really love how you always come in and you're always encouraging. You're always kind to everybody. I love how you come in and you're just ready to seize the day. I want people to be able to hear those things so that it can help with their confidence level too. In that middle box, it's what's important to me. When was the last time anybody asked our loved ones that? What is important to them? And then down at the bottom, how do you best support them? What do they feel is the best way to support them? So I love this tool too. It's great to hear all of that, but I wanted to give you a couple of examples, and these are actually examples from my son. And I'm actually going to go down a little bit because we didn't start off, because this is something that grows with you. And this is something that you can absolutely change over time and should change over time. So, the very first time I sat down with my son to do these life trajectories, he was a junior in high school. And this is exactly what we were trying to figure out is what are we going to do when school ends? I had been trying to talk with him about jobs for years, and that was going nowhere. I will say at one point he thought he might like to work at McDonald's until I told him he wasn't allowed. They don't allow you to eat the French fries if you work there. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you can eat French fries if you work there, if you buy the French fries. But my problem was I didn't necessarily think he'd buy the French fries. He would just grab some as he walked through, which they would not really like. As soon as I told him he couldn't eat the French fries if he worked there, he didn't want to work there anymore. So, but we wanted to talk about what were we going to do after school was done? Because while I'm sure that part of him wants to just stay home and play video games and watch TV, and goodness knows there is a place for that and a time for that. That's not all we wanted for him. And so we sat down to do this. And I said, Andy, what's your vision of a good life? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, okay, well, what are some of the things you want to be able to do? I don't know. I kid you not, if the kid could have jumped up and run away, he would have, but I think he knew he'd have gotten in trouble if he did. And so I knew if I kept just talking to him like that, we weren't going to get anywhere. And so I kind of took a different tactic. I said, you know what a good life to me is? I want to go to the movies. And he snapped his head up because that was not what he was expecting. I said, what about you, Andy? What do you want to be able to do? And he thought for a minute. And or he said, I asked him if he wanted to go to the movies, and he said yes. And so we wrote down movies. And I said, and I want to go to restaurants. My son does not care about restaurants, so we did not write that down. And so then I asked, what do you want to be able to do? And he thought for a few minutes. And he said, I want to go to GameStop. I said, okay. And we wrote that down. And so we kept on like that for a few minutes, talking about the things he wanted to be able to do. And I said, okay, Andy, you want to be able to go to the movies. You want to be able to go to GameStop. What do you need for that? And he stopped and thought for a minute and he goes, well, you need money. I said, that's right. You need money. How do you get money? And he goes, well, you need a job. I said, you're right. You need a job. What kind of job do you think you might want to do? And that's how we were able to start having some of those conversations. Now, we had that original conversation. And then when that was when he was 16 and he was a junior in high school. And then we had that conversation again when he was 18. And that's what you're seeing here. What were the things he wanted by the time he was 18? Well, he wanted a diploma and he wanted a good paying job. And I kind of giggled as he said that. He wanted to keep doing his guys' night out. And he wanted to keep going to Special Olympics. He wanted to control his own money, which I was very proud of him for. He wanted to vote. Again, very proud of him for that. What were some of the things he didn't want? Well, he doesn't want to live in a group home. And he doesn't want to lose his choice. He doesn't want to feel angry and frustrated. And he doesn't want to feel overwhelmed. So then we were talking about, okay, what are some of the past experiences you have that can help you get to your good life? What are the things you still need? And so that's how we kind of filled this out. And then later, my son wound up going to the Erskine Green Training Institute after he graduated from high school. And after he came back from EGTI, we did this again. And because his experiences had changed, what he wanted in life had changed, because he was growing up and he was having more experiences. And so here was his life trajectory after he went to Erskine Green, where he had already lived on his own for 10 weeks and got that taste of freedom that he liked, where he had a lot more experiences and he was able to kind of crystallize what he wanted to do and what he didn't want to do. As you can see, this was done during the pandemic because the very first thing when I asked him, what do you not want to do? He was done wearing masks. And frankly, I think we all felt the exact same way. But those were some things that we started to do. We also talked about, what are the things that people like and admire about him? What's important to him? I laughed because he literally said, "A roof over my head," as if that was ever going to be an issue for him. But I kind of giggled, especially at the way he phrased it. How is it best? How do we best support him? Well, for him, it's hands-on experiences make a big difference to him. Having music is a great way to support him because that helps calm his anxiety and helps him be able to focus better. Um, Allowing him to practice things is a great way to support him. And then we also talked about what are some of the resources in his life that can help him achieve what he wants in life. And so that's what this tool is really all about. And it can help crystallize some of your thoughts. It can help you brainstorm and help make it more tangible so that it's more achievable. Okay, so we've talked about all that. We've talked about life course and how that can help, but now what? Okay, well, once you've actually identified some of what constitutes that good life, how do you get there? Well, we're going to talk about self-direction and talk about those individual strengths and interests. Maybe we're going to talk more about education and employment, community resources and supplemental services. But the important thing to know is that you can always update, expand, or change your vision of a good life. And in fact, every couple of years or once a year, you should actually kind of stop and retake stock of your life. See if the things you wanted a year ago are still the things you want now. See if the resources that you need are the same. See if, because sometimes your skills change, what you want in life changes because your experience changes. And so updating that every so often is a really good thing. And so one of the most important things we can do is to create experiences because we want to make sure that we are exposing individuals to new experiences and especially engaging them in general community activities because so often we wind up getting people involved in experiences that are exclusively for people with disabilities. And there's absolutely a time and a place for that. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're not accidentally segregating people because that's never our intent either. So we want to get them involved in the general community as much as possible. And so we want to help them engage in things that we think they'd like. So for example, if they, really like, animals, maybe that's helping them volunteer at the animal shelter, or maybe volunteer to walk the dogs at the vet's office. But we also want to engage them in things that they don't like, in part to help them know what it's really like and to also see what they may think, because experiences can change people's minds. We have a lot of individuals who love animals, and so they think, oh, I want to work with animals when I'm done with high school. Up until they find out that working with animals means you've got to clean up the animal poop. Then they don't want to work with animals anymore. Sometimes we have people who try something that they don't like. And frankly, that can be really intimidating to try something you don't like or to try something that you may not be familiar with. It can cause anxiety, but you know what? We grow from that. We can gain confidence from that. So we want to make sure that we're providing a lot of opportunities so that they can explore all the different options that are out there. When my son was in high school, he was doing the pre-ETS program. And again, I'll get more into that here in a few minutes. But during fall break, they had arranged for a tour of a local super Kroger. And so that they could find out all the different jobs that were there. And I'll be honest, when I think about a grocery store, I think about the cashier and I think about the bagger. I think about, the guys at the meat department, and I think about the guys who are restocking shelves and who are putting the produce out. But what I didn't think about was the guy who makes the sushi. What I didn't think about was the person who decorates the cakes. What I didn't think about were the people who actually make the food that they sell in the deli department. Not just, the lunch meat, but, all the different salads and all the different food that they sell there ready to eat. The thing that blew my mind away is afterwards, I was talking with his pre-ETS counselor, And she mentioned that at that particular Kroger, they had 147 different jobs, not 147 employees, 147 completely different jobs just within a grocery store. I never would have thought of that. I wouldn't have thought about that. My son certainly would have never thought about that. And so when we have those experiences, it helps us learn more. One of the things I love about the Erskine Green Training Institute is that they have what they call career sampling sessions, so that students, individuals who are thinking about going there, can actually try each one of the jobs ahead of time to see if they're really interested in that. And my son did the career sampling session so that he could see what he thought. And of course, there were jobs I knew he wasn't going to like. He didn't like any of the cleaning jobs. I'm his mom. I knew he wouldn't like any of the cleaning jobs. He wasn't a big front desk person because that involves interacting with people, and that is not something he likes doing. Okay. But one of the jobs they have is a prep cook program. And my son, he's been learning to cook. That's something that we have done all of his life. And he enjoys that. And so he thought, oh, maybe I'll do that, until he tried it. Because when he tried that job, one of the things that he had to do was he had to wear a beard guard. And so he decided that was not a job for him because he really did not like wearing that beard guard. It was too confining on his face. It made him feel enclosed. That's something he would have never known ahead of time if he hadn't had that experience, if he hadn't had that exposure. So that's why creating those experiences are so important. But one of the things that we sometimes accidentally do is we're very concerned about keeping our loved ones safe. And of course, we want to keep them safe. Don't get me wrong. But in doing so, we want to keep them from emotional harm. We want to protect them from people who, because we're afraid they're going to get made fun of. It's done out of love. All we want to do is protect our loved ones. And so what we wind up doing is almost wrapping them in bubble wrap. And we wind up actually segregating them from the rest of the community. And that's never our intent, but it's something that we accidentally do. So we've got to be really careful about not wrapping our loved ones in bubble wrap and letting them experience life. And so when we talk about making sure our loved ones can have a meaningful day, for some, that's going to be post-secondary education, like college, or maybe a trade school or a vocational program, because we have a lot of individuals who learn much better when it's hands-on, when they are getting to actually try things, they learn it better, and then they know what they might want to do. For some, it's going to be getting a job. And I will talk to families all the time, and they'll tell me, oh, he can't work. Really? You don't think that he could, put cans on the grocery store shelf? Oh, yeah, he could do that. He did that when he was in high school in one of their job programs. Okay. So part of this is we also need to redefine work, because for a lot of people, they automatically, when we talk about work, they're automatically assuming that that means a 40-hour work week. It doesn't. When we're talking about jobs, that can be tailored to the individual. So for those individuals who want to work 40 hours a week, you can absolutely do that. For those individuals where that's just too much, that's okay. You can work part-time. You can work one day a week. You can work a single 4-hour shift. That's all okay. And the important thing to know that there is such confusion about is that, yes, you absolutely can work and maintain your benefits at the same time. There are lots of ways to make that happen. But for some people, maybe it's not a job, or maybe it's not a job initially. Maybe what we're going to start off with is volunteering, because that's a way to expose people to different options. When my son was in high school and we were starting to think about, life after high school, and frankly, when I realized, oh, wait, he needs letters of recommendation for different programs, we need to start working on that part. One of the things he started to do was volunteer. And so he and my husband volunteer once a month at our local food pantry. Why do they do it together? Well, initially it was so that my husband could kind of keep an eye on things and smooth anything over in case there were some issues that cropped up. To also help Andy as he was learning how to work in a new environment and things like that. And you know what? He's actually been doing that for more than 3 years at this point. And the people at the food pantry, they love Andy. They are very protective of Andy. They know that there are certain needs that he has, and they just accommodate all of that. And they know how to work with him and talk with him. But he has also shown them that people with disabilities are able to do a lot. So it's been mutually beneficial. And that type of volunteering, whether it's for a food pantry, whether it's for a humane society, whether it's for your church or your synagogue, wherever that's at, that also helps start building soft skills that are so important for employment. Those skills like showing up on time, being a good worker, getting along with other people. Sometimes those things have to be taught, but sometimes those soft skills are the skills where our loved ones excel. And so part of it is recognizing how important those types of skills are, because do you think it's important to your boss that you show up every day on time? You betcha it is. And those are the types of things that we can start building and start teaching from a really early age. And when you're volunteering, you're also giving back to the community. And like I said, in doing so, you're also helping the community recognize the value that people with disabilities bring to the community. But like I said, sometimes we're talking about additional education. And I want to start by talking about those educational options that are still available while somebody is in high school. So one of the things to make sure you know is that individuals with disabilities can stay in school until the school year in which the student turns 22. Okay, so what that means is if you've got a loved one whose birthday is in April and they turn 22 in April, well, that's the year that they're going to finish school. But if their birthday is in September, then they're going to have the entire rest of that year to continue in school. So it allows students to draw out classes and to take advantage of opportunities and services and supports that may be available to them. And I know we've got a wide range of abilities when it comes to people with disabilities. And so we have some who are going to be more on that life skills track, who are really going to be focusing more on those independent living skills and those job skills. But then we have some who are looking at college and things like that. And so then there are also dual credit classes, which are different from AP courses. AP courses will allow you to test out of courses in college and will allow you to get credit for those credit hours, but not affect your college GPA. With dual credit classes, you're actually enrolled both in college and in high school at the exact same time. And so you are getting college credit for those classes, and it does actually impact your GPA. The nice thing about that is you can be doing all of that while you're still in high school, while you still have your IEP, while you still have all of those services and supports available to you. The big issue, though, is that when it comes to those dual credit courses, you want to make sure that it's going to be for a college that you're going to attend, because if your school offers dual credit courses that transfer to Indiana University, for example, Purdue University is not going to take those classes. So that's just something to keep in mind. But one of the other things we can look at are vocational schools. Every high school has a vocational school that they're affiliated with. And it's part of high school. So your IEP is still in effect. You're still getting the supports and services available in your IEP, but it helps people explore different careers and actually train for work while getting those supports. It tends to be a lot more hands-on. Students who go into vocational schools, whether they have disabilities or not, are sometimes career ready when they actually complete the program. Others may need additional training because some programs actually require licensure. So for example, if somebody wants to go into welding, you can get basic welding, and you can do some professional welding, but you might need more certification once you're out of high school. If somebody wants to be a hairdresser, for example, that's something that's licensed in the state of Indiana. So yes, you can do cosmetology at vocational school, and you may be able to take your licensing exam at the end of that vocational program and as well, so that once you graduate, you can start making money and start working. Then there's also Project Search and some other options through IIDC. I was talking earlier about something called Pre-Employment Transition Services, or pre-ETS. That's a program through the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services, which is the umbrella agency that includes Voc Rehab. And pre-ETS is a program that is done in cooperation with schools, but it's not a school-based program. And the reason I'm very careful about that is because since it's not a school-based program, first of all, you don't have to get the school to agree to it. You don't have to have it in the IEP. In fact, they can't put it in the IEP, but it also means that they're not bound to the school calendar. So you can absolutely do things during the summer. You can absolutely do things during school breaks. So it offers a lot more flexibility. Excuse me, and it also provides meaningful career planning to help transition from high school to employment or from high school to post-secondary training. A lot of different things that Pre-ETS does. It's available to students with disabilities who are either eligible or potentially eligible for VR services. Okay, and that's that is how things are written in law. But what that means is any student with an IEP or any student with a 504 plan is actually presumed eligible for Pre-ETS services. Now, you do have to be between 14 and 22 years old. And for more information, you can contact the Pre-ETS provider in your area, or you can talk to your school transition coordinator who can help make that referral to Pre-ETS. But here's why I think that this is a really important service that's available, is because a lot of what they do is job exploration counseling. Like I said, exposing kids to different types of jobs and careers that can be out there. And they can talk about vocational interests and career opportunities. They can talk about what jobs are in demand right now. And then they can also help provide work-based learning experiences. We've got some really cool programs all around the state. They can help arrange job shadowing and apprenticeships, internships, work experiences, and volunteering. They can also help set up some informational interviews. They can also talk with you about what types of post-secondary options may be available to your loved one. They also do workplace readiness opportunities where they're going to talk about, how do you communicate appropriately in the workplace? How do you problem solve? How do you talk with your manager about, needing time off or needing an accommodation or something like that. And that's part of what they're working on. And then they're also helping students learn how to be self-advocates. So knowing how to advocate for what they want and what they need, helping to know their rights and their responsibilities, especially in the workplace. How do you disclose that you have a disability? And so they do a lot of work on that as well. We have some people who want to think about college. And so in doing so, you got to find the right college for you. And so the Center for Community Living and Careers down at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Communities actually has a booklet that they've written to figure out, is college right for you? The college internship program is something that you can look into. And then there are a lot of different ways to figure out the right college for you. So thinkcollege.net is a resource that's available. But I also recommend, if you're thinking about college, visit those colleges, visit them several times. And as you're doing that, make sure you're also talking to their Office of Disabled Student Services in advance. Develop a relationship with that office, because that way, if they know you, once you're actually at that college, if there's something you need and you go into their office, they already know you. They've already met you. They're going to try to help you however they can because you've already built that relationship up. And sometimes that might be things like, helping to arrange for extra time on tests or arranging for equipment or things like that. By the way, those are things that Voc Rehab can also help with. But it's a great resource to have available for students, and it's a great connection to have on campus. I'll also say there are a lot of disability related student organizations. So there are a lot, pretty much every college campus, especially those main college campuses, now all have student on the spectrum groups. Find those other students and talk with them ahead of time before you choose a college. Go talk to that student group to find out, or talk to students who have disabilities to find out, what is it really like to be a student with a disability on this campus? What are the things, what are the issues you've had? What are the things that have been helpful? And then also, InSource actually has some really great resources on their transition to adult life page on their website. I see we've got a question up here, so I'm going to go ahead and stop and answer a couple of questions here. I have an 8-year-old with high functioning autism with speech deficiency. First of all, holy cow, I'm really excited that I've got the parent of an 8-year-old on here. Way to go for thinking that far ahead, because I will tell you right now, I didn't. So you have really impressed me already. What major programs should I start now for him to help to be independent? You know what? We're going to be talking about that here in just a few minutes. One of the biggest things I would say is, if you have not already signed your loved one up for a Medicaid waiver, that's one of the big things that I would do, because that can help provide a lot of additional supports and can provide some other people to be able to help with learning some of these skills. Because the reality is, at some point, we are mom. And at some point, there will be a point in time where our kids will not believe anything we say. And when some independent third party says the same thing we've been saying for the last 3 years, suddenly it's true. So having other people that they can work with, not only helps them branch out, but it also winds up helping them be able to learn how to work with other people and be able to go to other people when they need help. Somebody else, there's a population not referenced on these calls, which are nonverbal, homebound. My son won't leave except by ambulance. Direct line of sight individuals. They deserve a meaningful life, but often people can't see a vision for them. Often this includes building a community around them. We did a car wash in the front yard one summer that my son loved watching through the window. I just had to quit my job to care for him full time, so it was income as well. We have to be creative with these guys. We absolutely do. And part of it is thinking outside the box. Part of it is recognizing that just because an individual may not speak, or just because an individual may have higher support needs, doesn't mean we can't create things for them. And one of the big things in that is recognizing that it may take time, and so, we need to figure out what are their skill sets right now, and what are their interests, to figure out how to plan for them. And so those are some of the things that we've got to talk about, and we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. When it comes to trade school, those can be a really good option for a lot of individuals, because it tends to be more hands-on learning as opposed to academic learning. If you're going to trade school to be an auto mechanic, you're focusing on fixing cars. You're not learning about, art history. Not that there is anything wrong with art history. It's kind of a fun topic, but for a lot of individuals, they really just want to be able to do things, and that's how they learn best. And a lot of times those trade school classes are directly related to the subject matter, so it engages that interest a lot more. And those can often lead to either professional certifications or lead to licensure, if that's something that is required here in Indiana. And both the Department of Workforce Development, which is the Work One office, Don't call them the unemployment office. That makes them very mad. But Work One or vocational rehabilitation services can help connect individuals and help them get some accommodations if they need for that, including on the certification tests that they may need to take. And so you can talk to your school counselors for more options on that. But Voc Rehab and Work One, these are both state agencies whose purpose is to help people find community-based, competitive wage jobs. Both agencies can help with high school equivalency programs. So if somebody maybe got a certificate of completion when they finished school, they can help them actually get their high school equivalency. We used to call it a GED. Now it's an HSE for a high school equivalency. They can also help with post-secondary training programs in college. They can help provide they can help with accommodations. They can also help provide supports directly, either by doing things like hiring note takers if you need a note taker, hiring tutors if you need a tutor. And then they can also help with information on financing that may be specific to you. And so they can do a lot. Department of Workforce Development also has some really great resources on their websites. So first of all, Department of Workforce Development is the agency who helps fund the adult learning centers. And so those are the centers that can help you go from that certificate of completion to a high school equivalency. I will tell you the Excel centers through Ivy Tech State College actually are one of those adult learning centers, and they have programs where they actually hire special education teachers to help you go from that certificate of completion to that high school equivalency to make it more likely that you'll be successful. Through a program called Work and Learn through DWD, they can help arrange apprenticeships for students. Work Indiana works with all the adult learning centers to get your HSE and career certifications. And they've got a website to help you explore what your options are there. They also have something called In Training, which is a WIOA compliant search engine to help you find different training programs and cost information, because it's hard to find some of those training programs, and you can say, hey, I want to know what programs there are for hospitality in our area, or I want to be an auto mechanic, what's out there, or I want to be a welder, what programs are out there. And what's great about this search engine is that it will tell you all those different programs that are out there, including a lot of the smaller ones that are harder to find out about. But then they also have cost information so that you can compare those cost differences, and it will tell you what type of certification or degree you may get, because sometimes you may have a program and yes, this program is much cheaper, but it's because you're only getting a certificate, whereas with this program, you're actually getting an associate's degree or you're getting a bachelor's degree. So it's got that type of information too. But one of my favorite tools is the WIN Career Readiness tool. This is a free online tool to help teach job skills. And so you can create a free account, and you can work on things like time management and social skills, but then also things like business writing and business math and things like that to really help get you ready for the workforce. I also want to talk about the Erskine Green Training Institute, and I will be completely upfront. I am totally biased when it comes to the Erskine Green Training Institute because I am the very proud mom of an EGTI alum. My son graduated from Erskine Green in December of 2000. He got his very first job in April of 2021, and he has been employed ever since. But this is a post-secondary training opportunity for individuals with any type of disability. But again, this is post-secondary, so you have to have finished high school, although you can apply while you're in high school. You don't have to have a diploma. You can have a certificate of completion. You can have a high school equivalency. Sometimes even people drop out, but it also doesn't have to be right after high school. And I think that's one of the misunderstandings or misconceptions out there, because the oldest student who's gone to Erskine Green was 58 when he went through. So there are students of all ages. And while it's available to both in and out of state residents, priority is given to Indiana residents. One of the other untapped resources that are out there are the Centers for Independent Living. These are agencies around the state that help individuals with any type of disability live as independently as possible. They can help teach some of those independent living skills like budgeting or housekeeping, or navigating transportation options. And they can also help connect you with other programs like utility assistance, transportation, home modifications, assistive technology, and even housing options. And the best part is, you don't have to qualify for a program to work with the Centers for Independent Living. You don't have to meet a certain level of care. You don't have to get approval. You just have to call them up and identify as a person with a disability and say, hey, I need help with this. And they say, okay. But when it comes to working toward that independence, because that was one of our questions earlier, is how do we start, how do we work toward that independence? But, there are some things that we need to do. And one of the biggest ones is working on being home alone. And as a parent, I will tell you that is terrifying, especially at the beginning. The first time my son was ever home alone, it was a complete accident. I had been out running errands and I got delayed, and I realized his school bus was going to beat me home by about 20 minutes. I will tell you, I was terrified. Like literally about the time I figured he would get home, I was calling home. I was trying to talk to him through the answering machine because of course he would not ever pick up a phone at that point in time. And he certainly didn't talk on the phone. And I know I'm totally dating myself by saying I was talking to him through the answering machine, but I'll be honest, I was in a panic. I was reassuring him, mommy's on her way home. It's going to be just a few minutes. Everything's okay. And I may have, exceeded the speed limit just a little bit trying to get home there. But when I got home, I ran into the house and what did I see? He'd put his backpack down, gone to the refrigerator, gotten an apple, and was watching cartoons, just like he would have done had I been home. I can't even honestly say that he didn't know I wasn't home. So that's when I realized, oh, okay, he's all right. And I realized he was okay. I was terrified. Took a while for my heart to slow back down to normal range, but he was okay. And that's when I realized, you know what? That's something we need to work on. And so maybe it's starting for 5 minutes and you just walk around the block. Maybe it's expanding to 10 and then 20, maybe expanding to half an hour, then an hour. The first time I left my son's home for the full day, I was cheating because both of my sons were home together. And we were just in town, but we were intentionally trying to leave them home alone by themselves. We were gone for about 8 hours. And I'm pretty sure I called 4 different times. I was trying not to hover, but just to check in. And very much their attitude was, we're playing video games. Will you stop bugging us, woman? So, they had a great time. They were fine. I was, having issues with that, but I knew that it was important to teach them how to do that. And so that's one of the things that we have to teach. One of those other skills that is essential to independence is making food. So, start with what they like and what you're comfortable with. So if you're not ready for them to use the stove, teach them how to make a sandwich. If you're not comfortable with them using a knife, buy a plastic or silicone spreader so they learn how to make a peanut butter sandwich or whatever the case may be. Identify the products and the technologies that can help. So for example, when my son was really probably in middle school, we were having dinner one night and I looked up and I realized my husband was cutting his meat for him. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm just cutting it up. I'm like, he has to learn how to do that on his own, because the reality is our society makes fun of the person whose mommy is still cutting up his meat for him. I knew he needed to learn how to do that. But bless his heart, he cut himself every time he tried to use a knife. And I knew that if we didn't do something about that, he was never going to pick up a knife again. And so one of the things I did was I went to a restaurant supply store and I got a knife glove. It's literally a Kevlar glove that they use in restaurants so that you can't cut yourself. And it's got kind of a coarse weave to it. So it kind of looks a little bit like armor. It looks like chainmail. So we called it his armor, which made him think that was really cool. And so he wore that glove as he was learning how to use a knife, and he couldn't cut himself anymore until he got to the point where he didn't need it anymore because he knew how to do it. In fact, when he was a senior in high school, he was taking a cooking class in school, and that was one of the things he brought in. And his teacher saw it and he's like, "Where did you get that?" My son looked at him like he had three heads. "My mom." But that was something that was technology that helped him learn a skill that he needed to while still keeping him safe and making me more comfortable as he was in the learning process. One of the other things you can do is you can get something called an induction burner. This is a special burner, and it does require specialized cookware. But what that means is if you've got a pot or a pan that a magnet will stick to, that will work, because what it does is it creates a magnetic field so that it's heating the pot but not the surface. So like literally you can be cooking and you can't burn yourself. So that's one thing, one of those skills that we need to make sure we're teaching our kids for life after high school, because that's something they've got to learn. It's a basic life skill. Managing money is another one. And that's one where, a lot of people are nervous about it. We need to teach them how to budget. We need to teach them what bills are. We need to teach them what our money goes to so that they understand, oh, hey, we actually have to pay for our water. We pay for our electricity. We pay for our TV. And one of the things is, especially, as parents, I will say, because I think that's a safe thing to say, we all grew up with our teachers telling us, "You're not always going to have a calculator available to you." Oh, yes, we do. We all have calculators available to us at all times now. So you know what? Who cares if your kid has to use a calculator to learn about budgeting? That's okay. It's just a piece of technology, and you are allowed to use a calculator because guess what? There are no more tests once you are an adult. But maybe that's teaching them how to use a debit card or a prepaid debit card. Maybe that's teaching them how to use an envelope system so that they're learning about money. But here's one of the big things about this too, is that, this idea that there are time limits no longer applies. We can take a long time to learn about this. We don't have to learn how to manage money in 6 months. We don't have to learn in a year. We can take that time and slowly be working on those skills, and always with additional support. We also want to talk about transportation because that is the key to independence. And so maybe that's teaching them how to use paratransit. Maybe that's teaching them how to use public transportation. Maybe that's teaching them how to use Uber or Lyft. And I will say again, terrifying. I taught my son how to use Lyft. And most of the things that I have taught my son to use, I'm going to be perfectly honest, is because I knew I was supposed to do it. Is it something that I was excited about? No. Is it something that I would have thought about on my own? No, but I knew it's what I needed to do. And so, for example, what we did was we actually, first of all, we used the same account. That way I can kind of monitor all of that. The first several times we did it together, and I was teaching him, okay, here's how you use that app. Look, they always send you a picture of what that car is going to look like, and it's always going to be this color. Look here, they've got a picture of the driver. So you always make sure the picture of that driver looks like the person in the car. Look here, they send you the license plate number so you can make sure it's the right car. Then I showed him how you can follow along on the map to see where you're at as you're getting to your location. Taught him that you had to tip when it comes to this. I also taught him that you actually have to leave a review, because what I did not realize when I first started using Lyft was that if you don't leave a good enough review, they're not ever going to send that person back to you. I feel really bad because I had some really good drivers and I didn't know that. But then, we did it several times together, and then I let him do it on his own for the first time. And again, we went through that whole process. But then, just as importantly, while he was in the car, we did a video call so that A, I could keep my eyes on him. B, we could talk through what was going on, and C, that driver knew that somebody else was paying attention to what was going on. So that made me feel more secure about that. And so we did that several times until we got to the point where he was doing it on his own. And he does use this on his own, and it does help increase his independence. But like I was saying, there are no artificial timelines once you're done with high school. And it's never all or nothing. And that's one of the other things that I want to stress, because I think that we think that when it comes to independence or things like that, that they have to do it completely on their own. None of us do anything completely on our own. We all have people that we go to whenever we have questions, or if we need some support, or we need to learn more. We turn to our sisters. We turn to our best friends. We call a plumber. We consult Angie's List to find out who a good plumber is. We're never all alone. Our loved ones don't have to be all alone either. So we need to identify what skills they have, and then we need to identify what skills they still need so that we can then work on those skills. We should identify what type of technology may be able to help them with this, and then identify those community resources or programs that can help. Part of that is making some community connections and developing some relationships. And so part of that is introducing them to the librarian, making sure they know how the library works so that when they need to go find a resource, they know to go to the library where they can find that. And if they need help finding it, they can go to the librarian who they already know. Part of that is making a relationship with your banker so that when you need money or you need to do something financial, you can go in and talk to the banker who you've developed a relationship with, and they know you, because let's be honest, how many people actually go into the bank anymore? But if you develop that relationship, they're going to be excited to see you. They're going to say, "Hey, Andy, how can I help today? What's going on, bud?" Maybe that's developing a relationship with a pharmacist so that when you have questions about your health, you can talk to them. Maybe that's having a relationship with your butcher to try to figure out, hey, what would be good to make for dinner tonight? But those community connections and those relationships we can develop as a result of that can make the difference between being successful or not, because you have other people who are also helping to look out for your loved one. And then we can also identify what types of paid supports can help teach skills. And that's really where Medicaid waivers come in. Medicaid waivers are home and community-based services that allow an individual to access services and live as independently as possible in their communities. That's the purpose of a Medicaid waiver. Now, in order to receive a waiver, an individual does have to be eligible for a Medicaid or appropriate Medicaid health plan category. But the waivers to the Bureau of Developmental Disabilities in particular are designed to be person-centered. They're designed to be individualized, and they're designed to help self-advocates be an active, integrated part of their community. They're designed to help learn those independent living skills, so you don't have to be the only one teaching them how to budget or teaching them how to manage money. You can have other people reinforcing those same skills. They're designed to help supplement an individual's needs and to also work toward that self-advocate's vision of a good life. Now, in order to qualify for a BEADS waiver, you have to have an intellectual or a developmental disability that was prior to age 22. But a diagnosis alone isn't enough. You also have to meet a certain level of care. Okay, so the condition also has to be expected to continue indefinitely. And again, you have to be eligible for a waiver compatible category of Medicaid. And what that really means is that once you are 18 years old, the Social Security Administration has to also acknowledge that you are disabled. And one of the nice things about this is that they don't look at family income or family assets when it comes to Medicaid for an individual with a waiver. They only look at the individual's income and the individual's assets. Then one of the other really important things we have to do is we have to teach decision making. And so we want to start teaching that as early as possible, and we want to make it age appropriate. So, yes, I really do mean letting your 3 and 4-year-old make choices. Making those age appropriate. So especially when somebody is learning how to make decisions, maybe that's giving them specific choices. Do you want this or do you want this? Before we're ready to open it up to be more open-ended, because just open-ended decisions can be a lot harder. And so sometimes when you have those more concrete choices, it's a little easier to make those choices. But again, you want to make those age appropriate. Are we going to let a 4-year-old choose to have cake for breakfast? No, we're not, because that is not appropriate. But let's be honest, when somebody brings in donuts to work, aren't we essentially having cake for breakfast? Yes, we are. And you know what? There comes a point where that is age appropriate too. You know, um, let your child choose what they want to wear. You know, who cares if they want to wear a pink tutu and green leggings? I wish I had the confidence of a 4-year-old who wants to wear a pink tutu and green leggings because she knows she looks fabulous. You know, we want to teach those decision-making skills. We want to use supported decision-making in particular, because when we're doing that, that increases self-determination and it increases confidence when people are able to make their own decisions. It improves quality of life, but it also leads to a longer life. So supported decision making is something that you're hearing a whole lot more about. And it's that idea of, I think a lot of times we wind up overthinking supported decision making because it's something that we all use in our own lives all the time. It's that idea of going to family and friends or experts for advice or guidance to help us make a decision. It's building a team of supports that they choose, that they know they can go to when issues or problems arise, or just for day-to-day advice. It's about gathering information and then learning how to evaluate those options, and then reviewing as many options as the individual wants to before they get to make the decision. And it's important that they get to make the final decision. And you can learn more about this at supporteddecisionmaking.org. We also have webinars specifically on supported decision making and other support options as well. And supported decision making can be used as a support. It can be used as an alternative to guardianship, but it can also be used in conjunction with guardianship. And when it comes to those types of legal or formal supports, there are a lot of options there. A lot of people think that they have to get guardianship when an individual turns 18. You don't. There are options available, and so it really needs to be tailored to the specific individual. And we start by determining what level of support a person actually needs, and then we also want to make sure that we're integrating supported decision making into all of that, into the support options that we choose, so that individuals have more say over their own lives. There are some tools available. This is actually a tool from Life Course about decision making to figure out how much support an individual actually needs. And there's a big spectrum of assistance. We're starting with independence and self-advocacy. Then we're going to a formalized supported decision-making agreement. Then team-based decision-making. Agency agreements like power of attorney, or a representative payee or a trustee. Then we're looking at limited guardianship, and then full guardianship is the most strict. And going the wrong way there. If you are more of a visual learner, we've got this in a chart that I got from Indiana Disability Rights, where we're starting with the least restrictive, which is independence on the far right. And then we go to guardianship, which is the most restrictive at the far left. But the thing is, and this is one of the hardest parts about our loved ones becoming more independent and leaving high school and becoming adults, is that we have to recognize that there is dignity in risk. Our loved ones have a right to fail, because the reality is we all mess up, every single one of us. Sometimes it's something small, sometimes it's something big. But the thing is, we get second chances when we screw up. People with disabilities often aren't given that right. If they don't do it perfectly the first time, they often don't get another opportunity to try again. And let's be honest, how many of us ever do something perfectly the first time? I know I sure don't. I mean, you heard me flub our intro at the beginning of this, and I do this quite often. We all screw up. Oftentimes, when they've messed something up, they're constantly reminded that they couldn't do it. And let's be honest, that's really dehumanizing and it's humiliating and it makes you feel awful. But the thing is, mistakes will happen. And we need to normalize mistakes. We need to figure out, what types of supports or accommodations to put in place because there will be mistakes. And mistakes help us know how to do it better the next time. Okay. And we learn from our bad choices. So we need to let people try and we need to let them try again. And we need to let them try again. And we need to let them try again. But when we do that, we also need to talk through those next steps. And that's one of the pieces that often gets left out is talking through those next steps. So if somebody has made a mistake, is there a way to fix that? How do we address the immediate problem that's caused by that mistake? How can we do it differently next time? And reassure them mistakes happen. We just learn from this and teach them to go to their support team, to the people in their lives, as just a matter of routine and as a regular part of that decision-making process, as a way to address some of these things. But some of this gets hard, and some of the hardest parts are that oftentimes we wind up focusing on providing the supports that we think are necessary rather than listening to the individual to find out what they want in life. Sometimes we've got people who are resistant to assistance. No, I don't need any help. To me, the hardest part about all of this, and I know that this is a me thing, but to me, the hardest part is accepting a decision that I don't agree with. That to me is the hardest part. And so making sure that the individual is making an informed decision, making sure that they understand the consequences of those decisions. Okay, if you spend all of your money on this comic book collection this week, that means you're not going to have money for your guys' night out next week. So you can choose what you want to do, but you're not going to be able to do both. So which do you want to do? Those are realistic things that we have to help people understand, and those are natural consequences, and there's nothing wrong with natural consequences. We want to make sure that somebody's not going to put their lives in danger, don't get me wrong, but sometimes we've got to let them make a choice that we don't agree with, and then revisit all of those things as needed. But here's the thing, when you have questions, or if you want to talk some of this through, or if you want to learn more, you can always talk with us. First of all, the ARC Academy is a great way to learn about a lot of these different topics and a lot of disability related topics. You can find that at advocacy.thearcacademy.org. We've got short videos and in-depth webinars on all sorts of disability related topics, and this will be posted there soon. So you can rewatch this if you'd like to. You can also always call and talk with one of our family advocates. Every single one of us who works for the Advocacy Network is either a parent, a self-advocate, or a sibling. So we all live this life too. And sometimes it's helpful to be able to talk with other people. And so I see we've got a couple more questions up in the chat or in the Q&A. And so I want to address some of those. And so this individual saying, not necessarily a question, but Voc Rehab denied my daughter's services, stating she was too disabled. Not to mention that they also stated at the time they only had funding to help the severely disabled. In other words, they had no funding for mild to moderate disabilities. I think the main help for special needs would be to have an all-inclusive one-stop shop for their needs. I completely understand where you're coming from, and especially when you hear, oh, somebody's too disabled to benefit from our services. Now I have to be nice and say that's really, really frustrating. But you know what? that's also not closing the door forever. And I think that's one of the things that I want to make sure people know is that even if you're denied at one point, that doesn't mean you're denied forever. And so part of this is, hey, let's start working on building certain skills. Let's talk about volunteering. And it doesn't always exclusively have to be you who's doing that. That can also be, if she's working with waiver providers, you can do that. I think back to a gentleman I know who has severe autism, and he does not speak, and sometimes he's got some behavioral issues. And you know what? He was working. But granted, that was before the pandemic. But one day a week, he worked at his local pizza shop, folding the pizza boxes. Because believe it or not, pizza boxes come into the store flat. Somebody has to build the pizza boxes. And it was something that was routine. It was something that was always the same. He would come in one afternoon a week for about 4 hours, and he would assemble as many pizza boxes as he could so that when the rest of the shop was making pizzas for delivery, they could just shove them in there. Was he doing it alone? Nope. He had, in his particular case, his behaviorist would go with him to work so that they could work on appropriate workplace behaviors and all of that. And he would help him, get through frustration and all that. Because again, this was a gentleman who has some behavioral issues and has higher needs. But that was something that he could do. Is that something that he did immediately? No, it's something that we built up to, or he built up to. And that's something else to know, is that, we build up to a lot of these things. Um, so, so there are a lot of different options, and there aren't any artificial timelines once school's done. You don't have to complete it by the end of the school year. You're able to stretch it out to whatever you need. All right. So does anybody else have anything that they want to share? Are there any things that they have tried that have been successful or have not been successful? You're welcome to put those in the Q&A. And if not, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know we went a little bit long. I apologize for that. But thank you so much for joining us. I hope that this was helpful. And if you want to talk about this more, you're welcome to call and talk with our family advocates. You can give us a call at 317-977-2375. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful evening.